How can you actually tell if you have Viking DNA, and is this even possible? Now, there are so many superficial videos and articles online talking about Viking ancestry, very clickbait type videos that are pretty unreliable, vague and generic. So in this video I want to look at a more grounded scientific way of how you can trace your Viking ancestry and look at 5 key points. And please let me know in the comments below if you think you've got Viking DNA and why you think so. Now, the idea of Viking DNA is compelling, of course, but it's also deeply misunderstood. After all, the word Viking did not describe a single ethnic group, and there is no single Viking gene as such. Instead, it referred to a set of activities, raiding, trading and exploring, carried out mainly by Scandinavian peoples between roughly the 8th and 11th centuries AD. Yet we know that these people that went Viking did leave a genetic footprint across Europe and by extension the world, and I want to dig into this and how you can trace this in this video. Now, the first clue is autosomal DNA, and this speaks directly to a question you may have. If I do a DNA test and I see Scandinavian DNA in my results, does this mean I have Viking DNA or Viking ancestry? Well, perhaps, but it's not this simple. As Ancestry itself notes in an article on Are You Part Viking? The Scandinavian ethnicity shown in your Ancestry DNA ethnicity estimate confirms your DNA is similar to a group of modern-day people in our Ancestry DNA reference panel with deep roots in Scandinavia. Not that it's a Viking signal per se. But for some people, the reason the Scandinavian percentage shows up could actually be because of the Vikings. Yet in isolation, it's hard to say for sure. And there is also lots of overlap between Scandinavian and Northern Germanic DNA in general. That's why if you're truly serious about tracing your Viking ancestry, having multiple lines of evidence that converge dramatically increases the probability of you actually having a meaningful Viking link. Timing can also be an issue here, as you could have Scandinavian ancestry from an ancestor who was not from the Viking age. But this is where other factors can help. Now, the second clue is location, where your family roots trace back to, as we know the Vikings had an elevated impact on certain regions. If your family roots trace back to areas connected to the Danelaw in England, for instance, or places like Orkney, Shetland, or the Hebrides in Scotland, regions known for having a notable Scandinavian influence, this can offer clues. Places like the Danelaw as well carry a lot of weight, as this was not just a zone of trading and raiding. It was a place of long-term settlement, law and cultural integration. Now, I should note that records rarely extend far enough to prove a direct Viking ancestor. What records can show, however, is long-term geographic continuity, which can then be tested against genetic evidence. And this leads us nicely on to our third clue on one of the strongest points, why DNA haplogroups. But quickly before we look at this, I did just make a member-only video on whether the ancient Britons and Irish actually came from Spain, as many of the origin stories suggest. Please click the top link in the video description below to get access to this video and various other exclusive member-only videos. Thank you for your support, and now on with the video. Now, the Y-DNA marker traces the male line back thousands of years, often with very small changes, giving us a glimpse into ancient history. And we know many of the main haplogroups Viking warriors carried. Now, on a broad level, the Vikings mainly belong to 3 main haplogroups. A 2020 academic study looked at Viking DNA, for instance, and analysed 276 ancient men, mostly from the Viking age. It found that I1 was the most common, at around 32%, followed by R1b at around 29%, and R1a was third, at around 21%. As far as some more refined branches, this study noted that a branch of I1, called IL22, was a common subclad in these ancient Viking samples. And this is a strong Scandinavian and Nordic branch today still, as you can see in this breakdown. IDF29 is another branch worth mentioning, as it's another one connected to the Vikings. We can also see some more recent branches of this marker in places like Scotland. IY17395 is an important one. with the man, who was the most recent common ancestor of this line, estimated to have been born around 1050 AD, right at the tail end of the Viking Age. Now, as far as branches of R1a, this study found that many of the ancient Norwegian and Swedish samples belong to R1a Z284. And the beauty of this branch is that it was much less common amongst Danish Vikings than Norwegian or Swedish ones, which means it largely avoids the issue of the Danish overlap problem. As when it comes to especially English DNA, it is sometimes difficult to separate the genetic impact of Anglo-Saxons versus Vikings who came from the same land we call Denmark today, something I have made a separate video on. This difficulty is especially the case when it comes to R1b U106, as well as I1 to a certain degree. Yet R1a Z284 largely avoids this issue of the overlap problem. Now, we also know some of the more refined branches of R1a Z284 in places like Scotland. We have a good idea of the Y-DNA line of Somerled, for instance, a mid-12th century Norse-Gaelic lord, who, through marital alliance and military conquest, rose in prominence to create the Kingdom of Argyll and Isles. Many Scottish clans also claim descent from Somerled as well, including the MacDonalds, the MacDougals and the McAllisters. Now, although Somerled lived just after the Viking Age, we know he partly had Norse ancestry, and we can see this in his Y-DNA lineage. RYP326 is strongly linked to Somerled, for instance, a branch downstream from R1a Z284. And Family Tree DNA's database actually has found the descendant Big Y testers group into subclass correlated with many of the expected clan surnames who claim descent. These are three of the key branches if you want to delve deeper into this. Now, the third broad haplogroup connected to the Vikings was R1b U106, and this was especially the case for Danish Vikings. But as I mentioned earlier, R1b U106 was also very high amongst the Anglo-Saxons and is connected to Germanic ancestry in general. So separating the influence of Saxons versus Danes can be tricky with this one. I have made a full separate video on this issue, like I said, but branches of U106 can provide some insight. If your branch clusters more with Scandinavians than German or Dutch people, this could be a clue. But because there is so much overlap in this northern Germany, southern and Scandinavia region, it can be difficult to separate U106 lineages. But that's where pulling other factors together can really offer some context to help interpret these results. And speaking of other factors, the fourth clue is surnames. Now, surnames go beyond having obvious Scandinavian surnames in your family tree, like Eriksson or Magnusson or whatever, as we know that many Scottish clans have Norse origins, or at least partly Norse origins, as there was a fusion of Norse and Gaelic lineages, especially in the kind of Western Isles of Scotland. Clan MacLeod is a key one, for instance, which is especially associated with the Isle of Skye in Western Scotland in the Hebrides. It means son of Loud, a name which likely derives from Old Norse roots, with Loud possibly linked to Norse royalty in Man and the Isles. Clan MacDonald, MacNeil, MacSween and Gunn are other notable families who have strong Norse origins, either to the Viking Age or related peoples just after. And I am planning on making a full video on the kind of Norse or Viking origins of many Scottish clans. Now, in point 5, I wanted to discuss some of the more softer features or softer evidence you might see online. For instance, some of you may be asking, if you've got blonde hair and blue eyes, is this a symbol? Is this a legacy of the Vikings? Well, not especially. We know that Vikings had a range of hair and eye colours in general, and when it comes to Europe, blue eyes were very old, and common going way back to Western hunter-gatherers. Now, some could argue that the Vikings could have had some role in spreading blonde-haired genes across Europe, as we know this trait had a long history in Scandinavia going back to Eastern hunter-gatherers, something I have made a previous video on, but the Vikings are far from the only source, so this isn't strong evidence either. Others point to a condition sometimes informally called the Viking disease. Its real name is Dupuytren's disease, a condition where the fingers, usually the ring and the pinky, begin to curl inward towards the palm due to tissue thickening. It is linked to the Vikings because it is common in people with Northern European ancestry. Yet similar to blonde hair and blue eyes, any connection is likely more speculative than anything else. So how do you actually know if you've got Viking DNA then? Well, the key is, if multiple lines of evidence converge, this dramatically increases the probability of there being a real and meaningful Viking link, from the location of your family roots to surnames to genetic evidence. A single point of evidence tends to offer clues rather than proof as such. Some also argue that essentially all Northern and Northwestern Europeans have a little Viking ancestry in them, which is probably true. But if you are outside of Scandinavia and are looking for a more direct, meaningful descent, looking at multiple lines of evidence is the best way to go. Although it can be difficult to prove 100%, given that these people lived around 1,000 years ago. But what are the DNA differences between Anglo-Saxons and Vikings? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and also check out the top link for member-only videos. But yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for your support, and I'll see you next time.